Hello, my name is Emma. I work in a small, cozy bookstore in the center of our town. Our bookstore is called Old Pages. The shop has big wooden shelves filled with books, some new and some very old. When you walk in, you can smell the paper and a hint of coffee from the small cafe area in the corner. The walls are lined with old pictures and artwork, and the warm, yellow lights make it feel like home. I spend my days here, helping people find books and organizing the shelves. I love my job because every book feels like it has its own story, not just in the words, but in the hands that have held it, the people who have loved it. Sometimes I find little things left behind in the books, old tickets, bookmarks, or notes. But one day, I found something truly special. It was a rainy Wednesday, and the store was quiet. I was going through a stack of very old books that had been donated to the store. As I opened a small leather-bound book, something fell out. It was a letter, folded neatly and placed between the pages. The paper was yellow and delicate, and the ink was slightly faded, but the words were still clear. The letter began with, "My dearest Rose," and continued with beautiful, heartfelt words. It was a love letter. The writer spoke about missing Rose, dreaming of being with her again, and hoping to hold her hand. The words felt so full of love and longing, it gave me goosebumps. He signed it, "Yours forever, John." There was no date on the letter, but it felt old, like it had been written many years ago. I felt a strange pull. Who were John and Rose? Why had this letter been left here? I wondered if Rose had ever read it, if she had kept it safe in her heart. I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I decided to find out more. The next day, I went to my boss, Mr. Thomas, who has owned the bookstore for over 30 years. He's a kind, older man with glasses and a warm smile. I showed him the letter, and he looked at it carefully. "Ah, this is an old one," he said, tapping the paper gently. "I think this letter might be from the 1940s, during the war. Many young men wrote letters like this when they went away. Sometimes the letters never reached their destination." Mr. Thomas suggested that I look around town, maybe ask some of the older people if they remembered a John and Rose. Our town is small, and people have lived here for generations. I thought this was a great idea. I decided to start my search at the local library. At the library, I met Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly lady who has lived in our town her whole life. Mrs. Jenkins has silver hair and bright, curious eyes. She loves history and knows almost everything about the people who once lived here. When I showed her the letter, her eyes softened and she smiled. "Oh, how beautiful," she said. "Yes, I remember hearing about a couple named John and Rose. They were young and very much in love, but John had to go to war. Many couples had to say goodbye back then, with only letters to keep them close." Mrs. Jenkins told me that Rose's family had lived near the edge of town. The house was still there, though no one lived in it anymore. It was old and abandoned now, but maybe there was something left of her life there. I decided to go visit the house, hoping to find some clues. The house was small and surrounded by tall, overgrown grass. The windows were dusty, and the door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, everything was quiet. The air smelled of wood and memories. I walked through the rooms, imagining Rose sitting by the window, waiting for a letter from John. In one room, there was an old dresser with a mirror. On the dresser was a small jewelry box. Inside, I found a photo of a young woman with soft, kind eyes and a warm smile. I wondered if this was Rose. She looked happy and hopeful, her face filled with love. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed a small bundle of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. Carefully, I opened them, one by one. They were all from John. Each letter was filled with love, dreams, and promises. He spoke of the life he wanted to build with Rose, of the places he wanted to take her. But the last letter was different. It was shorter, written with shaky handwriting. In it, John apologized, saying he could not return as soon as he had hoped. He said the war was hard and he missed her terribly. He ended the letter with, "No matter what happens, know that I love you, Rose. You are my heart." Tears filled my eyes as I read those words. I could feel John's love and sadness. It broke my heart to think of them separated, each waiting for a future they might never have. I wondered if Rose had kept waiting, or if she had moved on with her life. I decided to find out what happened to them. Over the next few weeks, I continued to ask around town. Slowly, pieces of their story came together. I learned that John never returned from the war. He was reported missing, and eventually everyone believed he had died. Rose had waited for him, year after year, hoping for a miracle. Finally, after a long time, Rose had to accept that John would not come back. She stayed in the town, but she never married. People said she would walk to the post office every week, hoping for a letter. She grew old here, alone, always keeping her memories of John close. The story of John and Rose stayed with me. I felt connected to them, as if their love and dreams had somehow become a part of me. I carefully put all the letters back into the small bundle and returned it to the house, placing it where Rose had kept them safe. I knew that was where they belonged. Now, whenever I walk by the old house, I think of them. I imagine Rose sitting by the window, dreaming of John. Their love had stayed alive through those letters, through the memories of the people in our town. And now, I feel honored to have been a part of their story, even in a small way. Though their love ended in sadness, it also showed me how powerful love can be. Hello, my name is Lily. I am 20 years old, and I live in a small town called Willow Creek. It's a quiet place, surrounded by trees, with rows of little houses and friendly neighbors who know each other well. The street I live on, Maple Street, has charming cottages with gardens full of flowers. Most of the people here are older, and they have lived in Willow Creek their whole lives. I have always loved it here, so peaceful and safe. One evening, I noticed something unusual. It was around sunset, and the sky was painted with shades of pink and orange. I was in my bedroom, reading, when I heard the sound of a moving truck. Curiously, I looked out the window and saw a man unloading boxes from a truck. He was tall and thin, with dark hair and pale skin. There was something strange about him, something I couldn't quite place. He wore a long coat, even though it was a warm evening. His movements were slow and deliberate, almost as if he was aware of every single step he took. Who could this be? I thought. People rarely moved to our little town, and when they did, it was usually families or elderly couples looking for a quiet life. But this man seemed different. He was alone and had an air of mystery about him. I decided to keep an eye on him from my window, watching as he slowly took his boxes into the small old house next door, the one that had been empty for a few months. Over the next few days, I started noticing more odd things about him. His house was always dark, with the curtains drawn even during the day. I never saw him leave the house, not even to buy groceries. Sometimes I would see a dim light in one of the windows late at night, as if he was up doing something in the shadows. And then there was the noise, soft, strange sounds coming from his house. It was like the scratching of metal or the sound of something heavy being moved around. I couldn't help myself. My curiosity was too strong. Who was this man? What was he doing in Willow Creek? I had to find out more. One afternoon, I decided to do a bit of investigating. I pretended to be going for a walk, but really, I was just trying to get a closer look at his house. I walked past it slowly, glancing at the windows, They were all closed and the curtains were drawn tightly. The yard was overgrown with tall grass. It looked as though no one had taken care of it for a long time. As I walked back to my house, I noticed something odd on the ground near his front door. A small notebook. It looked like it had been dropped by accident. I hesitated for a moment, but then I picked it up, my heart beating fast. I opened the first page and saw messy handwriting. It looked like a list of names, dates, and strange symbols. Some of the names were crossed out. I didn't understand what it meant, but it gave me chills. Later that evening, I sat in my room, looking at the notebook. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Why would someone carry a list of names like this? Who were these people, and why were some of the names crossed out? I decided to keep the notebook, just in case. Maybe it would help me figure out who my mysterious neighbor really was. A few days later, as I was coming back from the grocery store, I saw him. He was standing outside his house, looking right at me. My heart jumped. Had he noticed that I had his notebook? Did he know I was watching him? He gave me a small smile, but his eyes remained cold and distant. "Hello," he said in a low, calm voice. "I don't think we've met. My name is Mr. Gray." I tried to smile back, but I could feel the fear creeping up my spine. "Hi, I'm Lily," I replied, trying to sound casual. "I live next door." He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving me. "It's nice to meet you, Lily," he said, his voice soft but unsettling. "I hope you enjoy the neighborhood." There was something about the way he said it that made me feel uneasy, as if he knew more than he was letting on. I quickly made an excuse and went inside, closing the door behind me and locking it. After that day, I became even more cautious. Every time I went outside, I felt like he was watching me. Sometimes, I would catch a glimpse of him through the window, standing there in the dark, staring out. I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew I had been investigating him, that he was aware of my curiosity. One night, I decided to look through the notebook again. I flipped to a page near the end and noticed a drawing of a house. It was my house. My heart raced as I stared at the picture. Why would he have a drawing of my house in his notebook? Was he planning something? I felt a chill run through me. The next morning, I saw Mr. Gray outside again. This time, he was closer to my house, almost as if he was waiting for me. I gathered my courage and stepped outside, pretending to be calm. "Good morning, Mr. Gray," I said, trying to sound casual. He looked at me, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Good morning, Lily," he replied, his voice calm. "I hope you've been well." I nodded, feeling my palms sweat. Was this just a casual greeting, or did he know that I had found his notebook? I felt trapped between wanting to know the truth and being terrified of what that truth might be. That night, I locked all my doors and windows. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with questions. What if he knew everything? What if he was watching me, planning something? The silence of the night felt heavy, pressing down on me. Every little sound made me jump, and I kept looking at the window, half expecting to see his face staring back at me. Over the next few weeks, I tried to avoid Mr. Gray, keeping my distance and acting as though nothing was wrong. But deep down, I couldn't forget the notebook, the names, and the drawing of my house. Each time I passed his house, I felt a mix of fear and curiosity. What was he hiding? What was he capable of? Then, one evening, I heard a knock on my door. My heart stopped. I slowly opened it, and there he was, Mr. Gray, standing on my doorstep, his face calm but unreadable. "Hello, Lily," he said, his voice soft. "I believe you have something of mine." I felt a wave of panic wash over me. He knew. He knew I had taken the notebook. I could feel my hands shaking as I tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come out. He took a step closer, his eyes cold. I suggest you return it, Lily. Some things are best left alone. I nodded quickly, closing the door in a rush and locking it. I ran to my room, grabbed the notebook, and threw it back onto his doorstep that night, my heart pounding. After that, he never bothered me again. But I could still feel his presence, like a shadow lingering at the edge of my life, a reminder of the things I would never fully understand. Every time I walked past his house, there was a chill in the air, as though the very walls were holding on to secrets too dark to ever see the light. And though I tried to go on as before, I could always sense his gaze, a silent, unsettling reminder to stay away from mysteries that should never be uncovered.